with 1.4 around the corner, we're going to have Topaz and a Seele rerun. I thought it'd be a good idea to take the two characters and compare them with one another. As you all know, I do have a Seele and she's pretty well built, but I also will be rolling for Topaz, and I thought, well, why not help those that are also in the same predicament as I am? Topaz and Seele actually use the same supports, whether they're offensive buffing supports or offensive debuffing supports like Silverwolf. Bronya is an example of a character that both of Topaz and Seele can utilize really well. Silverwolf is an offensive debuffing support that Topaz and Seele can also utilize really well. So when it comes to team building, Topaz and Seele teams, for the most part, when it comes to Hypercarry, are going to be the very same way. You have your offensive buffing or offensive debuffing support. You can use Silverwolf or Pela, for example. Pela might not be as valuable with a character like Topaz because she is mostly single target, no AoE whatsoever, no pseudo AoE like Seele. That's the difference between the two characters for the most part, but Silverwolf is much better for a character like Topaz. Now, there's tons of healers and cleansers in the game, and ideally a character like Topaz, being very skill point efficient, is going to enjoy another skill point efficient character in the team, but that is only if you choose not to go with the Hypercarry team. If you choose to go with the Hypercarry team, then keep in mind that a team like this, for instance, pretend this is Topaz instead of Seele or vice versa, is going to utilize way more skill points, way more. And then as for the last character, you can use either Asta or you can use a character like Bronya. So Asta is very good with Topaz because of all the buffs she provides to the character, the fire damage, the attack buff, the speed buff. Speed buff allows Topaz to put on attack boots. It's very, very good. It allows her to do more damage and function well in the Hypercarry team. But for the purposes of the video, we're just going to use Bronya here for the Hypercarry. You can also switch out Silverwolf or Team Yoon and still get value as you would with any other single target damage dealer. So this would effectively be a very solid Hypercarry team to utilize with your Topaz or Seele, either or. Now this is where teams get a little tricky with Seele versus Topaz. Seele is going to be mostly suitable in Hypercarry situations. You can mess around with a team comp like this, for example, where you use a character like Clara alongside your Seele. You can mess around with a team like this, which isn't Hypercarry whatsoever. It still gets the job done because every character here can work well with one another. All these characters are skill point neutral to positive. Bronya being skill point neutral can be positive in very, very, very slim situations if you have her 5-star light cone and eidolon 1. And then Clara and Bailu are both characters that are skill point positive. Seele is a character that drains many skill points. To be honest, with this team, you probably won't be using that many skill points unless your Seele just gets so many resets. But you can use a team like this, but this is not an example of a Hypercarry team. In a team like this, you would get a lot more value out of a character like Topaz because Clara enables Topaz to deal much more damage with the Numbi, right? Pushing up the action forward of Numbi with all the counter follow-up attacks that Clara deals to the enemy. So you would get much more out of Clara's kit than you would with a character like Seele, who doesn't utilize the passive of Clara counterattacking to the advantage of the character. A character like Himiko would be really nice with Topaz against enemies that are weak to fire. So if you have a Himiko that is well built, maybe like the character, maybe you also have Asta well built, then you wouldn't mind going for Topaz because having these characters is very good against enemies that are weak to fire. That enables much more damage to be done with these characters, especially Himiko having the follow-up attack. Once your weakness breaking the enemy much more often because you have fire characters in the party, then you're going to be proccing the follow-up attack from Himiko and pushing up action forward of Numbi, dealing massive amounts of damage. These two characters, or this whole team, I would say, enables one another. There's a team I actually want to utilize with Topaz, and this team is because of QQ, for example, we'll get into in just a second, but you can just use Seele in place of Topaz in this team, and it'll be no different from Mono Quantum because that's what it is, but Topaz in the team means that QQ can actually land a follow-up attack on the enemy and push up the action forward of Numbi. Now, the truth is, if you actually do have QQ and Topaz in the same team, well, QQ is going to be the one getting all the skill points anyways. So having her in the team with Topaz isn't that bad of a thing because Topaz is a skill point positive hunt damage dealer. So, meaning you can put her in the team just like you would with Seele, but it's going to feel a lot more smooth than it would be with Seele because you obviously want to use elemental skills when you use that character. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, QQ has a follow-up attack on her eidolon 4. It is a 24% fixed chance whenever you use your elemental skill. Now, do keep in mind, as I said before, in that team comp, she will be the one using all of the skill points, so you will be proccing the autarky more often than you will think. And I say this in every video, but there is one more team comp that Topaz wouldn't be able to be utilized in as well as a character like Seele would, and that is going to be following the release of Huo Huo. Now, if she is a character, as I said before, that has buffs alongside her healing, buffs in the sense of trading off some of her healing capabilities for providing more buffs to the team and more buffs primarily to the damage dealer, right? Then she's going to be a much valuable character to have in a team comp like this than having with a character like Topaz. I'm sure you can still use her with Topaz, but a team like this enables Silverwolf to work really well, and this functions as a hyper carry team regardless. So the synergy with QQ is something I'm actually really looking forward to. The only time will tell if this actually ends up working, but having a follow-up attack character alongside your Topaz is definitely going to boost the damage of Topaz overall. Now, a lot of you probably already have Dan Heng and BB209, and if you have him and you have Seele, I don't suggest you pulling for Topaz in my honest opinion. Now, you could pull for whoever you want to, but if you're pulling for value alone, then it is in your best interest to just go for support characters for now, and then focus on a damage dealer later on when the damage dealers we have now become obsolete. A character like Topaz won't become obsolete so soon, but she is a character nonetheless that is a damage dealer. She does buff the attacks of your follow-up attackers, but we'll have other characters in the future that act as supports that will be doing that very same thing, or maybe just acting as a buffer like Bronya, for instance, who will provide more value than a character like Topaz in teams, well, hypercarry teams primarily. Now, of course, we'll have to wait and see, but I just want to throw that out there in case you already have this character. Last but not least, we have to compare the elements, right? Quantum is one of the strongest elements alongside Imaginary, and Fire isn't that strong aside from the break damage you get whenever you break the toughness of the enemy. You get a massive damage number, and that's how Asta is able to utilize the break effect on her build really, really well. But Quantum deals a ton of damage, it lowers the action of the enemy, and if you have more break effect, then you'll push that enemy back even further. That's why Silverwolf break builds are really good, and you'll deal massive damage whenever that enemy takes their turn. So Quantum Weakness Break is 10 times better than the Fire Weakness Break. But that's not to say that Topaz can't utilize Fire Break really well, because she is a single target damage dealer at her core. So she will be doing a lot of damage, especially with Numby taking many turns. And we all understand how single target damage dealers already do a lot of toughness bar to that single enemy. Last but not least, there's one thing to take into consideration. Some of the light cones you already use on your Seele, you might not be able to use on your Topaz. Now, a light cone like this is very flexible because it only provides crit damage and crit rate to the wearer. That's pretty much very, very universal when it comes to light cone options. Seals in the night light cone you will not be able to utilize on Topaz if at all, because Topaz is a character that does follow-up attack damage with her basic attack, elemental skill, and ultimate, all of which you won't really get much value out of a light cone like this, and that is because Numby does most of the damage. Topaz is just a supporter for Numby. Now, there is one light cone that Topaz and Seele can both utilize really well, and that's going to be a Swords Play. It is a 4-star light cone. At R5, it gives you an 80% damage bonus whenever you stack it up to the max, which is very, very good for a character that's going to be hitting the same enemy over and over and over again. The 5-star light cone from her to shop is going to be much more valuable on a character like Seele than it is for Topaz. And the only reason I say that is because the way of Seele's resurgence works. It enables the character to have an additional turn that is an extension of her own turn at that given point, which keeps the buffs that she had in her turn after she kills the enemy. So having that attack buff and that crit rate buff is going to stay on Seele versus a character like Topaz, where she needs to kill the enemy and the buffs would expire much more quickly, if that makes sense, because Topaz doesn't get additional turns whenever she kills the enemy. But it's still going to be a great option nonetheless, but I really do think that Swords Play probably will be better for the character overall. There is also one last thing worth mentioning. Topaz works really well, or will probably work really well with a character like Jing because of the follow-up attack buffing capability she has as a damage dealer. She puts that follow-up attack debuff on the enemy, that single enemy most likely going to be the boss enemy, and there's going to be adjacent enemies on the side, and then Jing can do most of his damage to that single enemy, buffing his Lightning Lord damage because of the debuff Topaz puts on that enemy, and then still kill the adjacent enemies with the splash damage of his Lightning Lord. All of which Topaz can buff for Jing, and this character is going to work really well with her. Topaz being a buffer for Kafka, potentially not going to buff the damage of the character per se, but Kafka buffing Topaz, or Numby I should say, and then Kafka working really well in the team anyways because she is a damage dealer that's pretty flexible because she does her own dot-based damage. And then she detonates those dots on the enemy, all of which you don't necessarily need to have many damage dealers in the team comp that can put their own dots on an enemy. One last thing to take into consideration is the fire break does apply a dot to the enemy. So if the enemy has a fire dot that Topaz puts on the enemy, Warrior Kafka will be detonating that dot, which further adds to her own damage. And then we went over it previously, but Clara is going to be one of the best allies to use alongside Topaz. That's because Clara has the potential to constantly push up the action forward of Numby. If you do have her ultimate into play, you will be hitting the enemy with adjacent attacks, which will still push up the action forward of Numby. So Clara is definitely going to be one of the best supporters alongside Topaz. It's making me wonder if we should put an effect regeneration. It's making me wonder if we should put an energy regeneration rate rope on this character just so she can have her all the time, because that might actually synergize really well with Topaz. But we'll have to wait and see what the future entails with these two characters. And another follow-up attacker known as March 7 with her counterattack with whenever she has an ally that is shielded or she is shielded herself, she's going to provide a lot of value alongside a character like Topaz. Now, one of the things I want to mention is it might not be as good as a character like Kafka, because you can guarantee that you will be hitting that enemy that needs to be hit in order to proc the passive for Numby to actually have his action forward. There is no guarantee that March 7th is going to hit that enemy that needs to be hit to push up the action forward of Numby, but the synergy is still there and it might be a little bit more RNG than the others. So to be honest, there is no easy way of telling which character is going to be better. I don't think either or is going to be better than the other one. If we're comparing damage, for example, in Hypercarry teams, which I'm sure is what most people care about anyways, I would say a character like Seele is definitely going to be better in Hypercarry teams in general, and that is because Silver Wolf has the Quantum, right? Quantum is very, very strong, and on top of that, we have to take into consideration that Seele's resurgence can't really be calculated as well as it should be. So the more investment you put into your Seele, the more damage output you're going to be getting, because if you're able to one-shot with your Seele, no matter who you're fighting, then you're going to get even more damage out of the character. So she's a character that excels at high investment when it comes to most characters in the game, but that's only because of how she works, right? That's the video here. Thank you for watching. I do enjoy Topaz as a character, but I really wanted to be honest there. I don't see her being better than Seele in Hypercarry team specifically, but I do see her being a very strong buffing support character for the future, and I think when we go forward with other follow-up attackers, she will be unrivaled in those team comps, right? I stream twitch.tv/Toshio. The link will be in the description. I'm going to be streaming consistently from now on. I will definitely try to have a stream at least 4 times a week. That's it. Thank you for watching and have a nice rest of your day.